the letter? I don't know if I'll ever be ready.
We're here to honor Monica Bard Quartermain.
What are you all standing around for?
I'm going to my mother's memorial.
The writers want you to believe Drew belongs at Monica's side. But the truth is, he doesn't. And the story crumbles when you look closer. Let's begin with a simple fact the writers seem unable to remember. Monica was never Drew's mother. He didn't grow up in Port Charles. Any maternal warmth Monica directed at him came from the mistaken belief that he was Jason. That distinction matters, not because the show explained it well, but because it should determine who actually has standing to grieve at Monica's memorial. Jason was raised by her. Drew was an afterthought discovered in the last few seasons. Yet the script treats them as interchangeable heirs to a legacy neither earned. Which brings us to the baffling creative choice to shoot Drew. If the intention wasn't to kill him, or to use the attack to meaningfully evolve his character, then what was the point? The aftermath only made him more insufferable. He wakes up, grates on everyone, and, despite an explicit restraining order barring him from the Quartermain household, he's being positioned to gatecrash a funeral. Imagine the funeral security, hopefully tighter than whatever the Quartermain front door staff has been doing, because bringing Drew anywhere near Monica's service is a recipe for intentional chaos. He would only be there to cause trouble. A few small notes of competence. Someone remembered to find Olivia, and that was a welcome, if brief, recognition of continuity. It's also oddly touching, and refreshingly human, to see the Quartermain family's smaller, quieter interactions survive the chaos. The scene of BLQ and her mother sharing cotton candy was simple, effective, and a reminder that personal reconnection is possible after betrayals and secrets. That reconciliation is worth the screen time. And credit where it's due, Jane Elliott's performance as Tracy Quartermain was raw and real. Her scene at the blackjack table with Ned, surrendering the outcome to the cards with the line, "Let's leave it up to the cards," was devastatingly on point. Whether she hits 21 or busts, the implication is clear. She will be at Monica's memorial, come what may. That commitment cuts through a lot of narrative flimsiness, but the show's structural laziness roars back when it comes to the more obvious mysteries. The simplest, most forensic solution to the Nathan question, open the grave, check for a body, run DNA, is treated like a conspiracy theory. It isn't rocket science, it's basic procedure. Instead, the plotting invents amnesia, fuzzy memories that conveniently stop at the gunshot, and a parade of half-baked explanations, which leads to the twin theory, the kind of neat little twist the show keeps flirting with instead of committing to. Suppose Liesl actually gave birth to twins, but Victor's tampering left her convinced she had only one son. Maybe Caesar? He knew all along there were two, and quietly raised or controlled one, while Victor rewired Liesl's memory to protect one child. It's a tidy explanation for multiple narrative blind spots, provided the writers actually follow through. Right now, it sits as a plausible hypothesis rather than a plotted revelation. That ambiguity extends to Ryan's return. He claims he's playing a polar opposite character from Nathan, not the older, kinder Nathan viewers remember. So what are the options? He's Nathan's malevolent twin, he's an imposter, a deliberate mimicry like the Drew-Jason facelifts and brain mapping the series has used before. He could even be a Peter-style impersonation. All of these are theatrically valid, but they demand internal logic. DNA matches, family ties to Faison, Nathan, Brit Eat Liesl, or a believable mechanism for erased fingerprints and altered records. Fingerprints and official data can be tampered with. The show loves a shadowy WSB, or laboratory explanation. But if the plot expects viewers to buy manipulation without consequences or explanation, it collapses into noise. That's where Brennan and the WSB-style labs should come in, if they ever truly do. The idea that Brennan or a government lab knowingly seeded or covered up an imposter plot years ago is a good one. It supplies motive, resources, and institutional reach. If that's the plan, reveal it. If it isn't, stop dangling it as a deus ex machina for every identity issue the show wants to dodge. Bottom line, The show keeps recycling familiar tropes: mistaken identities, memory tampering, mysterious twins, corrupt agencies, without the disciplinary rigor those tropes demand. When emotional beats like Monica's memorial or Tracy's heartbreak are earned and well acted, they land. When plot mechanics are ignored or treated as optional, the drama collapses into entitlement. Characters expect legacy and closure without the narrative work required to justify them. Either commit to the science and the detective work, open the grave, run the tests, or stop pretending that these loose ends amount to a satisfying mystery. General Hospital hasn't delivered a truly great villain in over a decade, and that's exactly why the show doesn't feel the same. Once upon a time, General Hospital knew how to craft villains who didn't just twirl mustaches. They devoured the scenery with charm, menace, and a maddening knack for survival. Characters like Jerry Jacks, Trevor Lansing, the Zaccaras, and Lorenzo Alcazar weren't simply disposable troublemakers. They were the lifeblood of the show's most electrifying storylines. Remember the Metro Court hostage crisis? The black and white ball that claimed Emily's life? Those were spectacles. High-stakes narratives that made viewers gasp rather than check their phones. These villains weren't faceless thugs shuffled in for a sweeps week stunt. They were layered, charismatic, and infuriatingly unforgettable. Jerry Jacks, in particular, was villainy at its peak. Charming, ruthless, and family-connected, just enough to make every betrayal sting. Sebastian Roche played him with a gleeful wickedness that was nothing short of intoxicating. Deliciously evil wasn't just a descriptor. It was practically his brand. From Grimm to 1923. Watching him, one couldn't help but root for chaos while secretly hoping he'd never leave. What today's General Hospital sorely lacks is precisely that kind of enduring menace. Villains who don't just vanish into prison cells or off-screen limbo, but return like clockwork to unleash fresh havoc. Helena Cassadine understood this. Jerry Jacks perfected it. The current landscape, despite earnest performances and clear effort, rarely achieves that same thrill. Soap operas thrive on villains, and villains thrive on longevity. Until Port Charles resurrects the tradition of the untouchable, irresistible bad guy, modern storylines will always feel like faint echoes of a far more deliciously dangerous past. Are you a soap fan tired of watching the best show on daytime television open with a PowerPoint slideshow? Soap operas, once masters of melodrama and grandeur, now seem incapable of mustering so much as a proper opening sequence. General Hospital, the last soap standing with any cultural heft, greets its audience each day not with a sweeping overture of elegance, but with what can only be described as a high school PowerPoint presentation. This, we are told, is the best that can be done in an era of shrinking budgets. Apparently, dignity costs extra. The irony is rich. The show itself remains the strongest soap currently airing, yet its introduction looks like something cobbled together by an intern on borrowed software. Fans long for the glory days of Faces of the Heart, a title sequence so refined it made even the silliest plot lines feel epic. That opening wasn't just music and faces, it was a statement. It said, "This is a show with style, a show that matters." Today's version says, "We couldn't be bothered." Of course, economics are often cited as the excuse. The runtime has already been whittled down to a meager 36 minutes, with every possible second shaved off to make room for commercials. Heaven forbid we sacrifice an advertisement for a moment of artistry. The argument goes that a return to a Faces-style opening would only shorten the show further. Perhaps, but one could argue that a polished intro would add far more to the viewing experience than yet another detergent commercial. The comparison to The Young and the Restless is particularly damning. That show, with its iconic theme and visually engaging montage, proves that a title sequence can be both timeless and revealing, offering glimpses of personality while still honoring its cast. Even casual viewers can watch those 30 seconds and instantly feel the weight of the ensemble. By contrast, GH's current intro is less ensemble showcase and more slideshow at your cousin's graduation party. And let's not forget the missteps along the way. The Sirens opening had its admirers, and the 2010 version, with names, character identifiers, and yes, Jane Elliott's impeccable hair, actually struck a balance of flair and functionality. But then came the homogenized ABC mandate of uniformity, stripping the soaps of individuality in favor of cookie-cutter branding. The result? Soulless sequences where even the final shots favored men, with Anthony Geary basking in the spotlight as though the series were his personal fiefdom. Subtlety, clearly, was not on the storyboard. It is telling that many fans now revisit YouTube compilations of past openings for a sense of nostalgia and, frankly, aesthetic relief. The 50th anniversary sequence in 2016 was a reminder of what once was possible. A title card that looked expensive, elegant, celebratory. Now we're left with something that feels cheap by design, as though executives decided that ambition itself was too extravagant. What remains is the contradiction at the heart of General Hospital. A show with rich storytelling still treated as though it doesn't deserve its own legacy. A soap of this stature should have an introduction that matches its weight, not something indistinguishable from stock presentation templates. Instead, fans are left with the Drew Show opener, a pale shadow of past grandeur, while they wistfully hum Faces of the Heart during yoga classes and hospital visits. The tragedy is not simply that the intro looks bad. The tragedy is that it broadcasts, before a single line of dialogue is spoken, that General Hospital has forgotten the importance of presentation, and in television, where spectacle is half the point, that is unforgivable. Here's the problem no one wants to admit. When death becomes meaningless, so does the drama. At this point, the writers of General Hospital appear to have run out of ideas, unless one counts recycling the back from the dead trope for the 50th time as creative genius. It's become a game of who's next, and the answer is apparently everyone. Comas, miraculous resurrections, and shock reveals are no longer shocking. They're just tedious. The only time a resurrection storyline retains any spark is when a true villain makes a brief annual appearance to stir up chaos before vanishing again. That kind of mischief has purpose. What doesn't is parading out Anna's twin again, once was already one too many, or turning every coffin in Port Charles into a revolving door. There's no shortage of names to throw on the undead waiting list. Madeline, Frank Benson, Peter, Stephen Clay, Silas Clay, Rafe Kovich Jr., Kiki, and, why not, Susan Moore, conveniently alive so Jason can finally meet his mother. Fans clamor for Morgan's return since his body was never found, making him a natural candidate for Port Charles' next Lazarus act. Bringing him back would ripple across half the cast, and for those determined to keep Sonny's mob dynasty alive, Morgan would make the perfect heir. Of course, no soap is complete without a coma. The latest attempt, Maxie banished to a hospital bed, feels more like a ploy to silence a character than to further the story. It robs her children, angers the audience, and reeks of lazy plot management. A magical kiss revival would be absurd, but at least it would be on brand. This isn't to say GH invented the trope. Days of Our Lives perfected the art with Dr. Rolf's resurrection potion, while other soaps from All My Children to As the World Turns have also populated their towns with ghosts turned flesh. Yet GH's problem lies in sheer overuse. When Jason, the man who has died multiple times, reacts in stunned disbelief at Britt's miraculous return, the irony borders on parody. Some characters' deaths truly deserve revisiting. AJ, Emily, or Justus were killed off for no good reason, sacrificed on the altar of shock value or petty writer feuds. Their returns might actually serve the narrative. Compare that to endless recycling of villains whose brains are literally in jars. Cesar Faison, anyone? And the absurdity becomes impossible to ignore. The irony, of course, is how characters and even audiences act astonished at every resurrection, as if half the town hasn't already experienced the exact same phenomenon. Anna herself has managed multiple deaths, yet still gasps in disbelief when another dead face reappears. Port Charles should frankly have its own CNN ticker for resurrections at this point. Recasts are another minefield. Spencer Cassadine's fate hangs in limbo, dead but not really, while fans debate whether he should return nerdy and spoiled or brooding and aristocratic. The reality is simple. If a character's body isn't shown, they're waiting backstage for their cue. Morgan, Spencer, maybe even Luke, despite actor availability or age, are all dangling on the hook. And if all else fails, the Cassadine family can always resurrect Helena with a seance, tarot cards, or sheer witchcraft. Why not? At this stage, Port Charles Cemetery is less a resting place than a revolving door. The truth is, a resurrection can be fun in moderation. It nods to the delicious absurdity of soaps in their 80s and 90s heyday. But when every third storyline hinges on the undead, it stops being campy entertainment and starts feeling like narrative malpractice. If the writers want to stir up Port Charles, perhaps they should try something truly daring, inventing a new storyline. Soap writers don't create storylines. They create genealogical nightmares. Michael E. Knight deserves a medal, not just for his decades of soap work, but for surviving the labyrinth of family trees that daytime television writers cobble together with the dedication of a drunk genealogist. On General Hospital, he now plays the uncle of his former TV son's real-life wife. That same actress once played the wife of his stepson on All My Children. Yes, you heard correctly. Tad Martin's son Jamie, his stepson JR, and JR's wife Babe all collide in this tangled mess of familial déjà vu. Confused yet? Don't worry, that's the point. A few days ago, when Knight playfully hopped onto Cameron's hospital bed, the scene wasn't just a wink at the character, it was a reminder of his history of soap-layered connections. His ad-libs make the chaos charming, even if the family charts require a corkboard and red string to decipher. And then there's the previous generation of casting roulette. Micah Alberti as Jamie, sandwiched between Jesse McCartney and Jacob Young, surrounded by love interests played by Amanda Seyfried and Alexandra Daddario. Yes, before Hollywood came calling, Seyfried and Daddario endured the rite of passage that is Pine Valley. JR, meanwhile, was Adam and Dixie's son, though he treated Tad as his de facto father figure. Brooke was Jamie's mother. Dixie had a daughter with Tad. Stewart existed. Try diagramming that without aspirin. Speaking of Stewart, the actor now playing Ezra on GH once portrayed Stewart's son on AMC. If that doesn't ring a bell, perhaps you remember him moonlighting as Matt Durning, the perpetually serious attorney on Beverly Hills, 90210. And then there was Babe. Yes, the Babe who married JR, thereby ensuring that Crystal, her mother, became unavoidable. Both women practically hijacked AMC in the early 2000s, much to the chagrin of longtime fans. It wasn't just Pine Valley. Every ABC soap seemed contractually obligated to let a new family eat the show alive. All My Children gave us Babe and Crystal, One Life to Live unleashed the Rappaports, and General Hospital chained itself to the Sonny, Carly, Jason, Courtney quadrangle. Still, some pairings survived the chaos. While producers tried to force Jamie and Babe into prominence, likely fueled by the actors' real-life romance, JR and Babe were the superior couple. They carried the tortured passion soap fans crave, even if the characters themselves divided audiences. The irony of it all? Soaps thrive on reinvention, yet their own history constantly loops back to haunt them. The result is a universe where actors are recycled, relatives blur together, and no one, not even the writers, can explain the family tree without breaking into a nervous laugh. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Jocelyn Jacks was ruined the moment they decided to make her a mini Carly. Daytime television has always thrived on coming-of-age arcs, yet General Hospital seems uniquely determined to keep its young adults stuck in an extended adolescence. The result? Two characters who should be thriving in layered, independent storylines, Trina Robinson and Jocelyn Jacks, remain trapped in shallow writing, parental melodrama, and the kind of character stagnation that makes viewers wonder if the writers even remember what college-aged people look like in the real world. Once upon a time, Trina Robinson had bite. Sydney Michaela's version of the character exuded fire and edge, and it seemed as though she was destined to become the next great young heroine. Enter Tabyana Ali, an actress with undeniable strengths in romance and light comedy. and suddenly, the edge dulled into something resembling regression. Instead of maturing after enduring druggings, kidnappings, false accusations, and the deaths of loved ones, Trina is treated like a precocious child. The show gestures toward growth. Witness her conversation with Portia about being treated as an adult, only to immediately yank her backward. One day she's asserting her independence, the next she's pleading with Jordan to save her parents into marriage. Why exactly should a 21-year-old, who only met her biological father 2 years ago, be this consumed with mom and dad's love life? It borders on parody. Worse, her college years consist of almost no college. Where's the social life, the chaos, the fun? Instead of reveling in messy independence, Trina exists as a therapist for Curtis and Portia, calling Curtis Dad so frequently it plays less like bonding and more like trolling the audience. She could be knee-deep in art world intrigue or tangled in a caper with Ava. Anything would be preferable to her current infantilization. Jocelyn Jacks suffers from the opposite problem. She's been saddled with Carly's DNA in every way but originality. Rather than forging her own identity, she's been groomed as Carly Jr., and predictably, the fit is awkward. The character could have thrived as Carly's opposite, a rebellious daughter sparring with her mother. But instead, she's been shoehorned into adult storylines that don't suit her, and relationships that lack chemistry. Her college career is a revolving door of abandoned majors, symbolic of her broader lack of direction. The writers then tried placing her in an age gap romance, and the result was about as natural as watching someone cram puzzle pieces from 2 different sets together. Eden McCoy has undeniable talent, but the role has been so muddled that a Michael-style recast might be the only way to salvage it. After all, Rory's takeover of Michael silenced years of complaints almost overnight. And let's not forget the parade of failed pairings. Joss had her closest spark with Cam, yet the show never invested in them. Since then, she's been mismatched with one suitor after another. If she's to rejoin the college crowd, now more mature than her peers yet alienated from them, she desperately needs either a credible love interest or a storyline rooted in her father's side of the family. A return of Jax, perhaps recast, would at least give her a grounding that isn't Carly 2.0. The issue extends beyond these two. Emma and Gio languish in undercooked plots. Emma reduced to a supporting role when she could be thriving as a WSB recruit, Gio endlessly brooding when his storyline demands more nuance. Even the veterans aren't safe. Willow has been gutted to make room for Sasha. Jacinda disappeared without explanation. Sam floats aimlessly. And Elizabeth, one of the show's strongest legacy characters, has no storyline at all. It's a parade of squandered actresses and hollow arcs, made worse by Drew's recent turn as a male bully, conveniently positioned to berate women during a cultural moment when audiences expect better. What General Hospital refuses to allow is for its young women to truly grow up. Robin, Brenda, Elizabeth, Emily, Maxie, Lulu, Georgie, Christina, Molly, each graduated into adulthood with H storylines that reflected it. Today's so-called young adults are still stuck babysitting their parents' marriages. Trina should be entangled in passion and art thefts. Joss should be finding her footing in espionage or law enforcement. Instead, one plays Daddy's little girl, the other plays Carly's understudy. Meanwhile, the audience sits through endless recycled storylines, waiting for the day the writers remember that a college-aged character doesn't live to monitor mom and dad's romances. Until then, viewers are left with an endless adolescence on screen, one that manages to be both boring and infuriating. Brit's miracle meds aren't suspense, they're sloppy writing, and it shows. General Hospital has never been a beacon of medical accuracy, but Brit's Huntington's storyline manages to stumble past creative license and fall headfirst into incoherence. The issue isn't just the disease, it's the medicine. Or rather, the mystery of whether her injections are groundbreaking experimental treatments or simply the standard Huntington's drugs available at any hospital pharmacy. At first, Brit's compliance with her shadowy captors seemed tied to access. These injections were supposedly unique, experimental, and potentially life-saving. That made sense. When she returned to Port Charles, however, she suddenly behaved as though all she needed was a doctor's approval for an ordinary prescription. The great mystery cure had apparently transformed into a garden-variety cocktail that any hospital could provide, until, of course, more mysterious injections appeared at her doorstep, courtesy of a cryptic sender known only as C. The contradictions pile up. If the medication is truly unique, why wasn't Britt in a panic the moment she left Croatia? Why was she comfortable returning to Port Charles without it? If her terrifying boss supposedly controlled her access, why is she allowed to lounge at Bobby's with a steady supply? And if Britt is truly in danger, why isn't she running as far from Port Charles as possible with Jason's cash instead of cozying into a new job? Then comes the paranoia-inducing delivery service. We're asked to believe Britt is willing to inject herself with anonymous doorstep medicine. No questions, no testing, no quality control, despite allegedly fearing her life is in danger. The only logical explanation is that she knows far more than the audience does, which undermines her supposedly frantic paranoia. The mysterious sender, C, only deepens the absurdity. Cesar Faison? Victor Cassadine? A random red herring? Whoever it is, Britt's nonchalant reaction to receiving black market medication from an unknown stalker raises more eyebrows than sympathy. Even the show seems confused. At one point, Britt was seen compiling a list of ingredients as if she could DIY her own experimental injection in Lucas's supply closet. Other scenes imply she's simply requesting the standard and expensive Huntington's meds because she has no insurance. One version makes her a captive of shadowy science. The other makes her a stressed patient in the American healthcare system. The result is a storyline that can't decide whether it's a thriller about dangerous experimental medicine or a cautionary tale about medical bankruptcy. The problem isn't complexity, it's sloppiness. Viewers aren't debating because the writing is cleverly layered. They're debating because the writers can't keep their own rules straight. Britt's plight should be harrowing, but instead it plays like a continuity error stretched into an arc. Is she secretly indebted to her captors? Is she just strapped for cash? Does she know she's in danger or not? The show keeps asking for sympathy while refusing to answer the most basic question: what on earth is she actually injecting into her body? The biggest mistake General Hospital made was never giving Martin or Cyrus a single heir. For two men with so much baggage, Martin and the late Cyrus remain strangely light in one department: children. It is remarkable that neither brother has produced so much as a single estranged offspring, given their colorful histories and the endless opportunities a soap opera provides for long-lost relatives to appear at just the right moment. Martin, with his revolving door of marriages, practically begs for the storyline of a surprise adult child knocking on his door. After all, soap opera logic dictates that an ex-wife could easily have concealed a pregnancy to avoid a custody battle, only for the truth to emerge decades later. The scenario writes itself. The mother dies, the child shows up in Port Charles armed with a deathbed confession, and suddenly Martin has to reckon with fatherhood. Add Blair Kramer to the mix, and the plot almost casts itself. Cyrus, on the other hand, invites more divided opinions. On one side, the idea of him unleashing a previously unknown adult child, preferably a villain, into Port Charles would be deliciously messy. Faith Roscoe's absence has left a vacuum for a formidable female antagonist, and a Cyrus daughter could easily fill it. On the other side, many would prefer Cyrus never breed at all, sparing the canvas yet another tortured soul spawned from mob ties. Both camps have a point. The prospect is tantalizing, but the show already struggles to balance airtime for its existing characters. Of course, General Hospital has never been shy about dusting off the secret child storyline when convenient. Sasha once floated as a potential Grey before that ship sank in favor of making her a pawn in Cyrus's drug schemes. Vaughn could easily be retconned as a Grey. And if precedent is any indicator, someone will materialize the next time writers need a new antagonist or family connection. After all, this is a show where parents routinely shoot their children, and siblings appear decades after the fact. The irony, of course, is that other legacy families have been stripped to the bone. The Baldwins, once prominent, have been all but erased, with Serena a distant memory and Scott barely present. Meanwhile, Sonny Corinthos compensates for the deficit by single-handedly procreating for the entire cast, children and grandchildren sprouting from every corner of Port Charles, as if he alone holds exclusive reproductive rights. Ultimately, Martin is overdue for a child revelation, while Cyrus's potential offspring could either enrich the villain roster or clutter an already overstuffed canvas. Either way, it's only a matter of time. In Port Charles, family trees don't grow naturally. They erupt fully formed whenever the plot demands. Sonny Corinthos murdered A.J. Quartermain, so why is General Hospital trying to sell him as the grieving family man at Monica's funeral? The notion of Sonny Corinthos and Carly Spencer inserting themselves into Quartermain family business, particularly Monica's funeral, is not only insulting but historically absurd. Their involvement would be the equivalent of inviting an arsonist to help rebuild the house they burned down. Let's review. Sonny murdered A.J. Quartermain, Monica's son, and Carly gleefully assisted in covering it up. Sonny once tried to strangle Edward Quartermain, showed no remorse over A.J.'s death, and even defiled the Quartermain mausoleum by sleeping with Ava among the family's graves. Yet viewers are expected to nod along when this career criminal and his enabler are presented as pillars of Port Charles morality. The show has set precedent for better taste. At Mike Corbin's funeral, Monica chose not to attend, donating instead in his name to avoid distracting from the moment. That was dignity. By contrast, Sonny feigning grief for a woman whose family he systematically destroyed would be grotesque. Tracy Quartermain's perpetual disdain for Sonny remains one of the last vestiges of realism. The easy solution? Let Grandpa Sonny and Grandma Carly babysit. Their absence would say far more than a hypocritical appearance. Funerals are for the living, yes, but no one needs the murderer of the deceased's son hovering over the casket. Of course, defenders will argue that Sonny and Carly must appear because of Jason, Michael, and now Gio, whose tangled ties connect them to the Quartermains. But messy people always use the "I'm just here to support so-and-so" excuse to justify showing up where they aren't wanted. Support can happen off-screen, at home, away from the Quartermain mansion. General Hospital has long been guilty of deifying Sonny, warping its own legacy to prop up a mumbling mobster as everyone's favorite grandpa. The erasure of AJ's death, the minimization of Monica's loathing, and the rewriting of Carly as some acceptable Quartermain in-law amount to historical vandalism. The Qs, more than any family, have suffered at Sonny's hands, yet the show continues to sanitize his role until he looks like a misunderstood family man. What should happen is simple. Sonny stays away. Carly, perhaps, can slip in under the banner of supporting Michael or Jason, though even that stretches believability. The Quartermains deserve space to grieve without the spectacle of their family's tormentor hijacking the narrative. The writers claim to honor Leslie Charleson with Monica's farewell, but if they simultaneously whitewash the Quartermain legacy by giving Sonny another undeserved halo, then it's not respect. It's revisionism. The best way for Sonny and Carly to honor Monica is to remain exactly where they belong, outside the Quartermain gates.